Yeah. Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm going to talk to you about the relationship between bees and elephants and how bees are protecting elephants in Tanzania. You guys can hear me? Yes? Okay. So if you know anything about African elephants, they live in the savannah. They're called Loxodonta africana. Loxodonta in Latin means oblique sided tooth, which is referring to their tusks. Elephants tend to speak in rumbles. And if you notice here, they go in lines and they keep in touch with each other. But the reason they do that is because they actually speak down the line to each other in rumbling. They put dust on their back to get rid of heat and parasites. These are just a few things. They tend to mate at the age of 8. They have unbelievably interesting feet, which is made of subcutaneous tissue. And that is their feet are huge because they have to deal with a lot of weight, balance issues, and shock on their body as they walk in uneven terrain. Their feet act like a 4-wheel drive, so they can pivot on a foot or they can move all 4 feet together. They actually have incredible amount of dexterity with their feet. Matriarchs, female elephants run the herds generally. There will be bull elephants that go and study they sort of follow larger bull elephants for a while, but usually the herds are matriarchal, and those elephants that lead those herds are usually more than 30 years old in order to be experienced enough to work against lions, pride of lions, for example. Elephants use their ears for flapping to hear, but they also are using it to cool themselves because they have a large vein on the back of them, which cools them. And their genetic diversity is accomplished through their migratory paths. So some elephants move north and south, and some migrate east to west. And when they cross paths, that's when they get the diversity to mate. So male elephants tend to have a slightly angled underside to them. Their front legs are longer than their back legs in many ways, so you can sort of see that on the right. Female elephants are a little more proportional. Their heads have different shapes. And the males can stand 13 feet and are 6.5 tons. The females are 3.5 or so, 4 tons. And then the babies are only running 200 pounds when they're first born. They suckle for 2 years and then they start to browse. So one of the things that is important in knowing about being in Africa is that if you are traveling around Africa and you're around wildlife, you never get out of the vehicle, unless, of course, you have to go to the bathroom, but you really don't plan to do that. And the reason you don't is because most animals in a national park recognize the vehicles as being not dangerous, but if you climb out of the vehicle, they will immediately think of you as a threat, and they can pick you off or attack you. So generally you stay inside the vehicles, and while you're in there, the animals are sort of like, okay, that's just a vehicle going by. That's not a problem to me. Elephants are a keystone species in the savannah because they make paths. They stomp down paths so that the rest of the animals can move through forest or through grasslands or whatever. Honeybees are not very big at all. So elephants are the largest land mammal, and honeybees run about 120 milligrams. They're not even a gram. They're less than 1/10 of a gram. And they are insects, so they go through 4 stages of development. You can see that in this upper middle slide where the queen is laying an egg. That's the first stage. That develops over a few days into a larva, which is kind of like a white worm. The white worm grows, and at some point it gets big enough to pupate, which means it goes under the cap of wax, which you can kind of see in the next to last little cell there. And that's where it develops into an adult bee, and then it emerges as an adult bee. So some of the pictures on either side are pupal stages of bees that are starting to go from that larval stage into their adult stage. And the one on the right is a drone, a male bee being born into the adult life. So it's emerging out of its pupal state. Africanized bees and European bees are both honeybees. They are both types of honeybees. You could see down below, though, in the bottom left, that an Africanized bee is a little bit darker. Sometimes they're a tiny bit longer, but they're both types of honeybees. It's kind of like we are all Homo sapiens, but some of us come from Asian descent, some come from African descent, some come from Native American descent, so on. And so that's how those subspecies of bees work. This is a picture of worker bees. They're girls, and they have small eyes. Drones have big eyes. The queen is a little bit longer than each of these. And what you see if you look at the cells below them is up in the far left, the top left, there are larvae that are sort of developing. They look like small white worms, but you could see them more clearly as you get to the middle of the picture as you're moving from left to right and downward. And then you can also see the pupa are getting covered with a wax coating in the right part of this photograph. So you're seeing several stages of the bees as they're developing, but they mostly larval and then a little bit are pupal. And the pools of yellow or brown that are in the cells are food. The larvae sit in their food and eat it that way. They actually absorb it. So queens last the longest. They often will last a year, 2, 3, 4. They used to last 8 years, but they don't anymore. Workers work themselves to death in 35 days, approximately. But if they are going to go through the winter, like bees that are starting to, they're starting to cluster now and get ready to go through the winter, those bees might last 3 months. Those worker bees might. Drones are good for a season. Those are the male bees, and they last for a season, but they eat a lot of food and they don't do any work. And so the workers tend to exclude them in winter because they take up a lot of resources. And so they are sort of left to fend for themselves and they will die from the cold. So there are usually 10 to 40,000 bees in a hive. And these honeybees forage on lots of different types of flowering plants. Okay, so difference between the honeybee that we have in the United States and the honeybees that are in Africa. If you look at Africa here and you go to kind of East Africa, you see Scutellata written sort of north-south, and then Monticola and Litoria. Those are subspecies of honeybees. In fact, everything on this map is a subspecies of honeybees. So if you go up to Europe and you go to Turkey and you see Anatolia, that's Apis mellifera Anatolia, and Apis mellifera Scutellata, and Apis mellifera mellifera, which is way up there at the top in Europe, is right underneath England, is Apis mellifera mellifera. Those are the bees that were brought to the United States. They're called European honeybees, and that's their subspecies name is mellifera a second time. Scutellata, Apis mellifera scutellata, is the Africanized honeybees, and they're much more aggressive. So if at any given time when I'm in European honeybees, I might have 15 to 50 bees coming after me. In Scutellata, I'll have 400 bees coming after me in my veil. Sometimes it's hard to see through the veil. So they're just more aggressive, and they follow you a lot longer. Tanzania is in East Africa. You can see the island of Madagascar below, down here in the bottom right. And Tanzania is surrounded like by 9 countries. Kenya's north of it. It's got Uganda across Lake Victoria. Then you've got Rwanda, Burundi. You've got the Democratic Republic of Congo is across the lake from them. Zambia, Malawi, and Mozambique are all sort of there too. So elephants are crossing between all these countries all the time. Sometimes they're going north and south, and sometimes they're going east and west. So I want you in the country of Tanzania, which is green. I want you to see the city of Arusha. It's sort of toward Kenya. It's up at the top. And it's usually a little bit to the east. So Arusha and Moshi are in areas where I will be. And another place is, could you go to the coastline and see the city Dar es Salaam? That's a financial center of Tanzania. If you go sort of inward, you go toward the word Tanzania. Just a little south of that is that town called Iringa. I didn't go to Iringa, but I'm in that Dodoma and Iringa area for some of the villages too. So when we're working with bees, those are two of the central places I am. Kilimanjaro is in the northern area up by Arusha, where I first started talking about Arusha and Moshi. That's where it is. It's right on the Kenya and Tanzanian border, but it's in Tanzania. This is the guy that got me into this project. He is the large animal curator at the Maryland Zoo. His name is Mike McClure. He is an elephant expert, and he knew that Lamech wanted to build some beehives, and Lamech didn't. Lamech is he's an elephant expert in Tanzania, and so Mike said, I've got this person I want to send over who knows about bees, and she doesn't mind Africanized bees, but even though they're very aggressive, she deals with them very well. And so I'm going to send her over to help you build bee fences. So it's this guy that got me involved in all this. He's a great friend of mine, and he's an elephant expert in the United States, also is sent to Canada, Mexico, and is going more and more to other countries to help with elephants, African elephants. This is Lamech, and he is the Tanzanian elephant expert, and I work with him a lot. Now, in Tanzania, they have various experts in wildlife, and they call them all the hyena guy, or the giraffe guy, or the antelope guy, or the gazelle guy. Well, Lamech is the elephant guy, and he was trained by the lion guy, who actually has a name named Peter, but you don't need to know that. You just need to know he was trained by the lion guy. So he is working with elephants and goes all over Tanzania and surveys them. And then there's me. This is what I look like. And I am now on the slopes of Kilimanjaro. I'm going to that waterfall behind me, which is a glacial runoff from Kilimanjaro. And it's very cold, but I'm going to go swimming in there. And then I'm going to walk back through these semi-tropical forests. They actually are tropical forests, and go home after this. So Tanzania is really a grassland in a lot of places. It's also mountainous in places, but it's very grassy, and it's one of the two major grass biomes. So it's called savanna. We have a grass biome here. It's usually in South Dakota. It stretches all the way down into Iowa and Nebraska, all those places where we grow where we grow corn and soybeans. It's what used to be our grasslands, and we've converted them to agriculture to raise corn and soybeans and other crops. In Tanzania, they have not converted it to farming. They just have it as grassland, and you can see various hooved animals walking around eating. It's also sort of volcanic there, and so sometimes you have to be careful of geothermal springs. When you get off the plane into Tanzania, there are a couple of things that hit you right away. One is the smell of dirt and diesel. So it's rural, and it's very, very, everything's dirt. And so you smell the earth all the time. And you also smell diesel fumes because all their vehicles are diesel operated. So when you're driving around in Tanzania, you come across these rural towns. People are just walking in bare feet or in sandals all the time. They're selling their wares in a local farm place. But there's also this kind of building that's going on that's making roads to connect them to the next country or to other full African continent. And so it has this sort of rural quality, but at the same time, this developing quality to it. This is Kilimanjaro. I spend a lot of time on the slopes of this mountain because that's where the elephants are roaming. It's at 3 degrees south of the equator, so it's almost exactly on the equator. It's really remarkable. It's 19,000 feet, and it has glaciers on it, which you can't see right here, but they are on the mountain on the other side. And those glaciers exist even though they're on the equator. So it's very warm. This grassland is all below it. And this mountain in particular is halfway between South Africa, the tip of South Africa, and the most northern part of Egypt. So it's about halfway through the continent. It's the highest place, and it's in Tanzania, although Kenya keeps trying to claim it. They don't own it. It's actually in Tanzania. So the problem here that I got sent to help address is called human-elephant conflict. It's also can be called human-wildlife conflict. So you'll see it abbreviated HEC or HWC if you read about it at all. And what's happening is Tanzanian farmers are very poor, and elephants migrate in order to create their genetic diversity and also to forage for food. And what they do is they come into the crop-rich area of a village and they eat everything of the crop. 10 elephants can eat an entire field in a night. And the villagers are so angry because that's their entire livelihood for a year. And so there's retaliation that goes on. And so what we're trying to do is stop that human-elephant conflict because it kills elephants and it kills humans. So you can see here, this is up by Arusha. It's near Moshi. Kilimanjaro is on, the national park is off to the right. You can see where these wildlife areas are, they're called WMAs. The national parks are the NPs. You also will have game reserves, which are GRs. But you can see that elephants will move between these national parks and management areas because they're going to have more food because they can't be farmed. And while they're doing that, they're going to eat crops along the way of villagers. So Kenya is right above it. You can see how close Kenya is to Kilimanjaro, or Kilimanjaro is to Kenya, even though it's not in Kenya. So now we're a little bit lower down. Remember I showed you on the map of Tanzania, a city called Dar es Salaam on the coast, and that was about halfway down on the coast. Well, that city is next to this rose compass on this map. And so we're now in sort of the middle of the country, and you can see that there's a wildlife management area, WMA, called Wamibiki up at the top. And then you have the Selous Game Reserve, which is GR below, and the Nyeri National Park. So elephants migrate between these national parks as well. This is the other area where I was working. And you can see a whole cluster of villages in there. So I'm going to be showing you stuff from those villages. This is where the human-elephant conflicts are happening. So within that little area, the yellow line is the migrating, that's one of the migrating paths of the elephants. But you can see how these villages are all sort of clustered together. They're along a railroad track. Toward the bottom is a town called Kasaki, and up toward the top of that oval red, that red oval where the red dot is a town called Kasemo. So those are two places where I've been. You need to know a little bit about tribes. So I'm just going to talk about the Maasai tribe for a minute because they're a very interesting tribe that inhabits all of Tanzania. The colors of the tribe are red and black, which is why this slide is red and black. And they tend to dress in red and black cloth, which I've shown you there at the top. They have one of the longest bee fences in the country. It's 2 miles long, and those hives are over toward the right. And then there's a little watering cup that they attach to the hives nearby so the bees don't have to fly far for water. This tribe is a little unusual. There are 120 tribes in Tanzania, and every Tanzanian knows which tribe they're from. They all get along. They all know who they are. They all dress the way that they know what their tribes should dress. But the one that's really quite interesting is the Maasai, because the Maasai roam and they only eat domesticated animals. They do not eat any wild animals. So they're the only tribe that is allowed to go in and out of national parks, because they'll drive their goats and their cows through national parks, but they won't eat any of the animals in the park. And so they have more license to move around the country than anybody else. And they're always moving to find forage for their animals. So sometimes you'll see two Maasai that may be from opposite parts of the country, and they will be dressed in black and red, and they will recognize each other because they're both driving animals to new forage. And they will say, oh, they'll speak in their own dialect, and they'll act like they're brothers, even though they've never seen each other and they're thousands, like hundreds miles apart. They will say, oh, let me hear about your village. And they will sit down together while their animals graze, and they'll talk as if they are brothers or sisters, and they will just have a great time together. But they go all over Tanzania. They also they train their kids to move livestock, and the more livestock animals that are owned by a tribe, the wealthier the tribe. So to have a lot of animals that are well foraged is a sign of wealth. And these are just kids who are foraging the animals for their village. Okay, so back to those villages along the railroad track. We're here. You can see that they're kind of hanging out along the railroad track, which is kind of a lifeline. And they're clustered in this area. Well, the elephants are going to travel through this area because they want to eat. When I go and stay in a village, I actually stay in an inn or a lodging place. And they're kind of clean and neat and very sort of no grass or trees around it. They're very sort of clean and swept. And they have these immense walls of protection around them. So you can see the protecting wall of this hotel. It's not only concrete, but it's got terrific lines of barbed wire all around it. That is not just to keep humans out. That is to keep predators out, like lions and elephants that might try to come through those walls. And they often have bars on the windows to keep animals from climbing in through the windows. So it's really weird. It's like being in a military barrack. This is what a typical hotel room looks like. There's a queen bed that's usually in a very small space that you have enough space to get into the bed and get out of the bed. And then you have a mosquito net above it. You have a small bathroom with no Western toilet. What you do is you have a bucket of water and you take a cup of water out of the bucket and you pour it down the drain when you're done. And you always have bottled water because there's cholera in the water. So you have to be careful not to get cholera. Some of the items on the bed are indicative of how I live when I'm in Tanzania. For example, they only eat about two meals a day, one at breakfast and one maybe at 4 o'clock in the afternoon or so. So I always have snacks because Westerners tend to eat 3 meals a day. I always have a charger that will fit their electrical cords and electrical outlets because they have weird electric outlets compared to us. It's 220, we have 120, 110. So you have to deal with that. And also they have very strange sort of plugs. So that's part of it. I also have mosquito repellents to repel the tsetse flies. That some people pronounce it tsetse, but they're tsetse flies. And then I always have wipes with me because I'm never sure if I'm ever going to get to a bathroom. So I always need hygiene wipes for myself in every way. It might be to wipe the sweat off too. So those are some of the things that I carry with me all the time. A very few clothes because it's not too many clothes difference, and just things that I really truly need and nothing more. Okay, so now we're in the village of Kasaki. This is an elephant rampaged village. Now you can see why elephants are considered keystone species because they can drive a path into anything. They have absolutely trampled this crop. they are moving from the forest into the crop, and they're just eating everything in the way, and they uproot everything too. So this is why these villagers get so irate. There is a grass called sisal grass, which grows there, and it's used a lot in making hemp, making rope and twine. It's also used in lots of different ways. Sometimes it's used for roofing, it's used for bags and carpets and rugs and things. The elephants will just rip these up with their trunks and destroy them. And that's a lot of work for Tanzanian farmers. There are plantations of sisal, as you can see in this particular valley, where it's really organized. But an elephant, if a group of elephants come through, they can really destroy a good portion of that crop, which is just economic loss, terrible economic loss to people in rural Tanzania. The elephants will also strip bark off the trees. They will knock over the trees. They will uproot the trees because they're hungry. They want the leaves, so they knock the tree down to get the leaves if it's up at the top. They eat the bark. They're big guys. You don't argue with them. So they can eat an entire crop of corn or tomatoes or squash or watermelons in a single night. And the average Tanzanian in a month will make about $140. So figure that's like $1,500. They might make $2,000 a year. That's their income. That's really low. And so losing any of that money or not having something to barter with is just a terrific loss to them. So this is what they do to the elephants. They get really pissed, they get really angry, and they come after them with whatever they can, and they will attack them, and the elephants will get angry, and they kill the elephants kill them, and it's human-elephant conflict. So in order for not all this to happen and to preserve the species of elephants and keep the farmers a little bit happier, we build bee fences. So here is this town. This is the village of Kasaki. You can see that every village has its own little village map, and we build a bee fence, let's say along the bottom line of this map. And then the elephants are not going to like the bees because they don't like getting stung in their trunks or behind their ears. Those are very sensitive to them, and they remember everything. The reason they remember everything, by the way, is our neurons go from axon 1 to axon 2 to axon 3 to axon 4. Ours are linear. Elephants have axons that are more like cotton candy, where every axon can reach other axons. And so they have a phenomenally good memory because of their neural systems of interactions in their brains. So anyway, an elephant will remember if it gets stung, and it can translate that memory to the entire herd to make it the memory of the entire herd, so that everybody in the herd remembers that bees hurt them. And that's how this works. So we go to a village, and when you go to the village, you have to have permission to go into the village from the village official. So you see me on the left. I am standing next to the village official, who is the guy next to me in the blue shirt. And then there's a woman with a hijab on. So Tanzanians are half Muslim and half Christian. They're kind of evenly divided in those two religions. And she is the expert in agroforestry. She's an agriculture expert. Then you have, along that back row, 2 American women and Lamech, the elephant guy, on the right. Then in the front row, you have an Asian American she's actually gone to Nepal now to open an elephant sanctuary. And next to her is Violet, who I have claimed as my daughter. She works with Lamech. And so I tell her she's my daughter. She calls me Mama. And then my hand is on the Swahili English interpreter named Judith. So we have to get permission from the village official to go into the village to help build and this is the official building to meet the official. Generally in Tanzania, they hang their hives from trees like this, where they would be logs that are hollowed out, and the bees live in the hollow log. Now, Tanzanians are getting more sophisticated. They still hang their hives from the trees, but now they build them so that they're lighter weight. They still use pulley systems. This is a modernized, so to speak, traditional hive, and they're hanging from trees, which is very normal in Tanzania. That's not what we do. What we do is use a trapezoidal hive, which is called a top bar hive. And all these parts are built first, and then we do a fire brigade where everybody goes in line and we pass each piece into the truck and we stack them, and then everybody jumps on the truck and goes to the field and we build the beehive fence. So they don't know any beekeeping, and they are learning beekeeping as they build these beehive fences. You can see a hive is down by where I'm standing. It's trapezoidal. You'll see a closer view in a minute. It's hanging on 2 poles. And the idea is to have these hives strung together with cables so they swing. You want them off the ground so that the honey badgers don't get into them. But you also want them all connected in a long line so that if an elephant passes through the line, the bees will, in every hive, will be pulled out. They'll be jiggled and they'll all go, what's going on? And they'll all come out and sting the elephants. And that's how you get the elephants to remember, don't do that again. So there is a male African beekeeper who I was working with here. He's a very nice guy, but he doesn't know any bee biology. He's very good with business. He's very good at making contacts. He's very good at networking, but he really doesn't know much about bee biology. The problem for me as a woman is that men don't really want to listen to me because of my status as a woman. Even though I'm an expert in the field, they don't want to listen too much to me. The women will listen, but the men listen preferentially to Justin because they believe that he knows all about beekeeping. And it's kind of interesting because they don't know that much. And then when I come back each year, they're kind of like, well, she knows it. Let's ask her. So you have to sort of infiltrate the system slowly. And the women will pay attention because women know that they're going to get the things done. And so they give me a lot of respect. Men less so, and that's okay. So we teach them and we discuss and we get everybody organized, and we're going to go build these hives and we're going to get them all strung together. But while we're out there next to the railroad tracks, there are animals passing through. In this case, these are herded probably by a Maasai that's walking through with these animals, or it might be the local Kasemos village where they have some animals too. But all the time, you're always out, way out in the open, and you don't know what's going to come around the corner. A Cape buffalo can come around the corner, or a herd of goats could come around the corner at any time. It's really fascinating to be there. Kind of unnerving at times, but this is fine. I like wild places. So we get a hive strung on cables. This is an end hive, so it's the very end of the line here.